Hello, I'm Dr. Diane Webster, and the story I am about to tell you is called 4 Ways to Die at Riverside Towers. It's a careful what you wish for story. If you actually get your wish, it may not necessarily turn out the way you thought it would. So be sure to listen to it to the very end and see if you can answer the question, what are the 4 ways to die at Riverside Towers? Let's begin. We really thought we'd made it when we first moved into Riverside Towers in Brisbane. It all started off as a thought experiment on my part. I had been going to hear Jim Rohn speak, and he talked about visualization as a way to bring your big ideas into reality. So in February 1994, Tim and I bought the penthouse apartment in Riverside Towers, off the plan as a dare to ourselves. We didn't have the $1.8 million required to purchase it, but we didn't need any money to purchase the best apartment in the building off the plan. The developers hadn't even started to build the building at this stage, so they had a sweetheart deal for any buyers that would opt in to purchase an apartment in the future. We only had to come up with the 10% deposit in 12 months' time, and the final amount on settlement in 1997, which was 3 years away. Surely we would be able to convince some banks to loan us the money over the next 3 years. We thought we would just take 1 year at a time. That's what Jim Rohn said to do. We just had to convince a bank to loan us $180,000 in a year's time, and then convince another bank to loan us the remaining balance in 2 years after that. It seemed relatively simple, as long as we continued to work hard in our successful business. Amazingly, we managed to borrow all the money from several banks during that time. In April of 1997, we found ourselves moving in with our 2 small boys, Richard and Patrick, aged 6 and 4. And along with us, also moving in, was our huge mortgage, of course. We woke up on our first morning, Sunday, in our very large apartment, and I went out onto the expansive balcony to admire the fabulous view across the Brisbane River to the beautiful park opposite in Kangaroo Point. Suddenly, I saw a dark shape crouched in a fetal position across the river in the park, surrounded by a circle of burnt grass. I found the binoculars and couldn't believe what I saw. "Oh God, Tim, there's a dead person that is completely burnt to death in the park across the river," I declared to my husband. Before long, we could see through the binoculars that the police were arriving. They cordoned off the area and erected a privacy tent in a circle around the dead body. This didn't interfere with our outlook, of course, since we had literally a bird's eye view from above in our penthouse across the river. As the coroner's team came to photograph and take samples for evidence, eventually the corpse was taken away. We later heard on the news that a homeless person had been sleeping in the park and some youths had poured petrol over them and set them alight. This whole scenario was not a good start to the idyllic life we were expecting to have. Now we're in our so-called dream home. On our second day in the apartment, we came home at the end of the day from work, and I once again went out onto our sweeping balconies to admire the river view with the ferry boats crossing in front of us. To my astonishment, I could see a bevy of emergency vehicles on the Story Bridge. The traffic was backed up in both directions on either side of the central incident for kilometres. What were they all doing? The trusty binoculars were found once again, and I could see there was a person standing on the railing of the Story Bridge. "I think he's going to jump," I said to Tim. Close to the jumper were 2 men who I thought might be mediators trying to talk him down. I turned on the radio and heard the announcer say, "Traffic is banked up on the Story Bridge this afternoon. where it appears a man in his 30s is threatening to jump. He has recently gone through an acrimonious divorce, apparently, and custody case regarding his 2 children. The situation is unfolding and we will keep you updated. Well, again, we had a bird's eye view of the potential jumper for the next 2 hours, and we intermittently watched the scene, in between getting dinner, of course, for our whole family. The man on the railing eventually came down to the footpath to talk to the counsellors and then was taken away by ambulance. He didn't jump, thank goodness. Our 3rd day at Riverside Apartments, Tim and I arrived home at about 9 p.m. after seeing a movie in the early evening. We had walked to the cinema since our new home was so close to the city. As we walked into our complex from the back entrance on Queen Street, there was an ambulance parked in the middle of the cul-de-sac, and I could see a dead person smashed on the pavement at the base of the apartments. Police were arriving, and several of the other residents of the towers were standing by, observing the unfolding scene. "What's happened?" I asked one of them. "Someone has jumped or been pushed off the 28th floor balcony, it seems," someone said. "Yeah," said another, "and they've just raided a meth lab that's been set up on the 12th floor. The police are not sure if the 2 are related." What more could happen at this expensive nest of our dreams, I thought to myself. Friday night, first week at Riverside Towers. It's 11 p.m. and there's just me with our 2 little boys fast asleep in our apartment. Tim is away on a short business trip over the weekend. The fire alarm suddenly sounds. It's really loud and continuous. Surely the little boys will wake up, but they continue to sleep soundly. I open the apartment door that opens out to the corridor and I can smell smoke. This is serious, I'm thinking. There is definitely a fire in the building. We are on the 35th floor, right at the top. I've got 2 small boys asleep in bed. We can't use the elevator because it becomes non-operational in case of fire. How can I carry 2 small children down all 35 flights of stairs? I phone 000 and tell the operator my situation. "I'll put you straight through to the fire truck commander," the operator says. "There are 3 fire trucks at your apartment complex now." Within moments, I'm speaking directly to the fire chief in charge of the fire trucks at the base of my apartment building. "Stay where you are," he said reassuringly. "We're coming up." Not more than 2 minutes went by and I heard pounding on the door of my apartment. I opened the door and 3 huge firemen, fully decked out in all their gear, were in front of me. "No need to evacuate," the spokesman said. "We've got the fire under control now. It was on level 17. Just stay where you are with your children and we will contact you if there are any changes." In the morning, I heard on the radio that a woman had died in the fire that broke out in the new high-rise complex, yes, our Riverside Towers in Brisbane. If I had been a superstitious person, I might have thought it was a bad omen having these 4 deadly experiences happen the first week in our expensive penthouse. It turned out that in August 1998, just 18 months later, after we had moved in, we had to put our apartment at Riverside Towers back on the market. We had spent more time waiting for the complex to be built, 3 years, than we had spent living in the apartment, 18 months. We needed a quick sale because my business had gone into administration and then liquidation, and creditors had to be paid to avoid bankruptcy. Then my marriage subsequently broke down under the strain. We sold the apartment for $800,000. That's $1 million less than we bought it for. But the market had crashed. So much for Jim Rohn's mind experiment, suggesting that you can create your ideal future. I say, be careful what you wish for. It may not turn out just as you thought it would. That's the end of the story. A collection of my short stories with the same name is available on Amazon and Kindle, or listen to the other stories anytime on my YouTube channel at Dr. Diane Leslie Webster, and subscribe to get notice of more stories. It's free. I hope you have a great day today, doing something that you love with someone that you love.